Judge Hidalgo and Rodney and myself have been leading the conversation on equity. Because in previous natural disasters, the recovery that has come in is generally federal dollars. And the federal dollars that have come in are applied using what is called a cost-benefit ratio. Meaning that where there is the greatest value to protect, that's where the dollars should go. So if you live in a $500,000 home, chances are you're going to get the federal dollars in that area to protect your property. But if you live in my house, you're probably not. And so to address that, using the local dollars that Rodney fought to create at $2.5 billion, we're trying to ensure that the dollars are now spread into areas that have not received any of the previous federal dollars, even though they received the same type of damage.
Yeah.
And that has turned into an incredible fight. Being challenged at the legislature, because it's currently in session. The government, the GLO, the General Land Office, is trying to institute a formula that says that just because your kids have moved out of your 4-bedroom house and there's only you and your spouse living there, that we'll give you dollars, but you'll rebuild a 1-bedroom house. And a few other things that are taking place. So that fight is still ongoing, and Rodney, I'm just proud that he was thoughtful of this, because when the bond package was passed and voted on by then 4 Republican commissioners and 1 Democrat, the language of equity was in there. And now they've got amnesia.
And it's important to note the equity language that was added from my office was by my policy director, who is Hispanic, who was with me, and now he's chief of staff to the county judge. But obviously we had some leverage, and we knew that old language. Here's an example. You think of these bayous. Anybody know about Sims Bayou?
Oh, you got a question about Greens Bayou over here.
Well, it got the same issue. You remember when Sims was called Chocolate Bayou? It was not a term of endearment. You got me? So the only way Sims Bayou got widened was because they went around the cost-benefit ratio. It never would have meant it. Because those houses in Sunnyside, where I grew up, they just didn't meet the cost-benefit ratio deal. Nor would Greens or Halls Bayou, which are mainly in black and Hispanic neighborhoods. So when that was going on, we got a lot of money from the federal government. We didn't get as much money as they got in New Orleans after Katrina. We did not get as much money as they got on the East Coast after Sandy. But we're getting more money than we have ever gotten before. About $2 billion at least to the county, about $2 billion to the city, maybe more, but at least we know about $2 billion each. That's 4. The city spends about $5 billion a year, 5.2. County spends about $5 billion if you count everything, flood control and all that we handle. I just looked at my notes because I couldn't remember the number. We lost 360,000, 360 to 320, one of the two, 1,000 houses in Houston. Now that's a whole lot of people. Now it was an equal opportunity storm.
Yes,
it hit everybody. But what commissioners make a reference to is historically the people who could get covered were the people who were in the high-end neighborhoods. So that's a big battle, and we put together a task force to figure out. We're not saying that you don't go in there and just consider the inequity. We're saying it's one of the factors you look at.
So when you talk about one of the factors, an audience question says, we were flooded in 2017 and 2000 during Allison. There's not one thing done to the lower Green Bayou, from John Hopkins to I-10, and still nothing being done, no dredging.
You said Greens.
Yes, Greens.
Yeah, Greens. Well, that's why. Because most of this money would follow the Corps of Engineers. Going back to the old Ronald Reagan executive order that has been interpreted to mean the Corps project takes into account the cost-benefit ratio. Isn't that a nice phrase? That means if your house don't cost enough, you get no benefit. So that's why this bond issue was so big. Could have been even bigger, but look, let me make sure I stress this to you. Even with 2.5 billion, and even with what we spend normally, city and county on flood control, 2 billion extra for the city, 2 billion extra for the county, we are not going to stop flooding in Houston. You got me? If you want to stay somewhere where it does not flood, you might have to back up. You got me? But what we want to do is have resiliency. We want to do the best that we can to manage it. And when we distribute that $2.5 billion, in my mind, Halls and Greens ought to be at the top of the list. And that's why this equity language is so important. So that battle is kind of on hold for now, but when it's time to vote, we got to take that into account. We can bring in the independent group to go look at it. We know flood control came in and told me. I didn't understand this cost benefit stuff. Commissioner, when I was in the legislature, the guy from Poppy from flood control came in to me and said, well, we think Congresswoman Green, and Sheila Jackson Lee could really be the voice. And I'm thinking, wait a minute, you want me to go get them to change something that Ronald Reagan put in? I wish you told me when I was in the legislature. That's the craziest thing in the world. But it is the law.
Yeah. And let me add one more nuance to this.
Because I want you to address the good faith effort that everybody says you all are challenging.
Yep. So let me also add another nuance, back to the immigration point. The conversation that has been had over the last almost 2 years now, and the fact that folks who may have family members who are American born and have access to things like health care and are now being targeted, are still not applying for recovery dollars, even though they're eligible.